Hello, good morning, everybody. How are you? Thank you once again for joining me. Gosh, it's all come around quick again, hasn't it? I hope everybody's well and enjoying things as lockdown releases a bit more. I hope you've got something planned for your weekends and you can get out and enjoy yourselves a bit. Anyway, today the subject is deposit-free renting schemes. And the reason why I wanted to discuss this with you is because James Ande now have taken on one of these deposit-free renting schemes, and there's a number of reasons why we've done it. I think since all the issues that we've had with COVID-19, etc., the landscape has changed once again, and the environment that we work in is changing again in terms of tenants and available funds and things like that. And I think it's important to try and cater for this. Obviously, deposits have been around, deposit-free renting schemes have been around for a little while now. But really, from our perspective, it was a case of really observing and seeing what was happening in these markets and how the deposit-free schemes were working out in reality, and if there was anything that we needed to be wary of. But now we feel comfortable and ready to partner with one of the schemes, which I'll talk to you about very shortly. So let's get started. I'll share my screen. We've got a rather good-looking set of slides today. So I want to say thank you to my colleague Deborah, who is very, very good at these slides. So yeah, thank you very much, Deborah. I don't know what I'd do without you, actually. Okay, so here we are, deposit-free renting. Also, in addition to what I said about the changing environment that we work in, demand for this service is actually starting to take shape a little bit, more so in our Putney office than Sheen and Barnes, I would say. But I think that's due to the demographic that we deal with in the Putney office. Again, financial positions of tenants, furloughed staff and things like that. People have taken a pay cut. I know that my girlfriend has taken a pay cut in her job and is still on a pay cut, but hasn't stopped working, and in fact has probably taken on more work than ever. But that's one of the things that's happened recently. And again, cash deposits, they are a lot of money, aren't they? It's several £1,000s. So hopefully these schemes are offering benefits to tenants, but also there are benefits to landlords as well. So here's your information page. Here are just a couple of the deposit-free renting providers that are available out there. There are a number, there's just 4 here, but if you wanted to investigate further, you're very, very welcome, and you've got all the links that you need. So what is the deposit-free renting? So like we said, a number of companies have emerged that offer landlords and tenants an alternative to the traditional, what we call cash tenancy security deposit. These services are often referred to as deposit-free or deposit replacement schemes, and have gained quite a bit of traction, as we've mentioned. And there are still new suppliers emerging in this field. So when using these products, instead of paying a cash deposit, tenants pay a non-refundable fee to purchase a product or join a service that offers the landlord protection against financial loss. There are also some alternative models where the landlord or agent actually buys the policy or bond to protect themselves. So there is some variation there. Now, as part of bringing this to you today, and also our considerations and thoughts about deposit-free renting, there were a number of considerations that took place. And I just wanted to show you these so you get an understanding of what to look at with deposit-free renting, and also where we're coming from, okay? Because, I think they've been going a few years now, but deposit-free renting schemes are relatively unproven. And while there is a bit of experience with the early-to-market providers, I think, agents who want to decide to include a deposit-free offering in their business model do need to be careful with who they choose as their partner, because everything is offered in a different way. And as always, agents should be aware of the potential risks involved in participating in the schemes. Look at the protection offered, for example, and specifically the consequences if the provider fails and the landlords are no longer protected. you know, agents all should check the small print of any scheme, of course, to make sure there are no exclusions or conditions that could limit the protection offered. So here are the first three considerations that I mentioned. The first is FCA regulation. FCA regulated providers are required to follow the regulations and guidance set out in the FCA handbook, of course. Obviously, they're designed to protect customers and avoid unfair practice, along with behaviours associated with things like mis-selling. The FCA rules are extensive and require that firms need to put in place a range of procedures and safeguards to demonstrate that the business is run by fit and proper people, and that they've got adequate working capital in place, along with several other requirements. So there's an element where agents who offer customers an insurance product must be aware that they're bound by the FCA rules around promoting financial products. So in many cases, agents can't advise or sell. We can only introduce an insurance product unless we have the required authorization from the FCA. Okay, now, again, Financial Conduct Authority rules are pretty straightforward and pretty strict. So again, it's usually a case of, here's an alternative to your traditional deposit. You don't have to choose it. It's there if you want it, in terms of how this is presented to a tenant. So the second part, protection under the Financial Services Compensation Scheme and Financial Ombudsman Service. So a provider may themselves be regulated by the FCA. Their product might not. Only those schemes that are classed as contracts of insurance fall under the protection of the Financial Services Compensation Scheme and give customers redress through the Financial Ombudsman Service. The FSCS, the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, is also important because that provides protection for customers in the event that a provider fails. So if an agent uses a scheme that doesn't have this protection, they should really be aware and make their clients aware that they are actually reliant upon the success of that provider and may lose protection, you know, should the worst happen. So the third part is cover. We need to be clear on the cover offered by the scheme. What guarantees are offered? What type of loss is covered? And is the cover limited in any way? And how does that compare to a cash deposit, for example? These are the questions that we asked ourselves. So moving on, the next set of questions that we asked were, what about deposit resolution and complaints handling? All schemes offer a form of arbitration. And so for landlords to be paid for any claim at the end of tenancy, there is an arbitration service if the tenants disagree with the landlord's claim. So we want to be confident that whoever's providing this service for the adjudication and arbitration will deliver a fair and impartial outcome for landlords and tenants, and that's really important. In terms of a fair outcome, a fair deal is one of the things that we've looked at. So pricing varies across the sector. Some providers will offer a standard price, such as a week's rent, whereas others will actually leave the pricing down to the individual agent. So the sixth element was commission. Now, some of the schemes pay a commission or referral fee to us as agents, some don't. Where the commission is paid, under the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations of 2008, agents, we are legally required to be transparent about this with tenants and make it clear to them what commissions we are receiving. Also, agents who offer their customers an insurance product are required to follow the financial promotions regime as set out in the FCA handbook. So there are certain rules to follow here that we need to be careful of. Now, our final consideration was that of the tenant fees ban, because it says you can't charge tenant fees. So if there's a charge for taking up one of these services and joining one of these schemes to the tenant, how does that work? It certainly raised a lot of questions within the industry. So the way that the tenant fees legislation is framed makes it clear that an agent can offer these kinds of no deposit schemes as an alternative to a traditional one, but not as a compulsory replacement, as we mentioned earlier. So, you know, and again, the ways in which it's sold, we need to be very careful. So if an agent does, you know, act improperly in a way that breaches the Tenant Fee Act, they could face a fine of up to £30,000, which is fairly significant. It seems quite straightforward, but yeah, it's all there to protect tenant and you as a landlord. So I hope that set of sort of 7 considerations there has given you a bit more insights, you know, into the inner workings of deposit schemes, but also into how we've thought about and gone about the process of making sure that what we provide to you is a quality product and where you're going to be protected, of course. So when it comes to all the different schemes, we've thought about, you know, the questions we want to ask and investigate, but there are so many schemes offering so many different services and fees, etc. Let's have a think about that. So where there are the different schemes, more or less, they share a similar approach to their claims of comparable benefits, for example. This could possibly include, for example, as you see here, tenant benefits, which is in the middle there, which could be just as simple as tenants not having to pay a 5-week deposit when moving into a privately rented home. There are also landlord benefits, of course. So, you know, the deposit schemes purport to offer landlords greater protection than they would get through a traditional 5-week security deposit, potentially faster onboarding of tenants, fewer voids, and potentially less hassle when the tenant moves out. Again, in terms of marketing, a deposit-free option could have a benefit there in terms of what it brings to you as the landlord. I mean, broadly speaking, as we've seen, deposit-free services will fall into pretty much 2 categories. Those which are selling insurance policies to tenants, where the providers are FCA regulated, but not all the products themselves fall under FCA regulation, but also the other category, those which are themselves insurance-backed, where the scheme insurer is FCA regulated. So just to explain a bit further on that front, let me just show you another screen. Okay, so here is the comparison. Now, I hope you can follow here. So just looking along the top line there that we've highlighted, you've got the elements of the scheme and what they offer and how it works to a degree. And then down the left-hand side from top to bottom are the different providers, okay? So let's just have a quick look along the top lines there. So Canopy, are they FCA regulated? Yes, they are. Protected by the FSCS? Yes, they are. Up to 8 weeks rent via Canopy's rent passport is the cover that's provided to landlords. Mid-tenancy renewal or other conditions. So default cover is 3 years, regardless of tenancy length, after which renewal fee is charged. Is there dispute resolution? Yes, via Hiscox. Is there an upfront cost to the tenant? Yeah, 12% of the sum insured, but depends on the tenant's circumstances. Extra costs in addition to upfront fee. Cost of the policy is calculated based on the value of cover and not length of tenancy. And then finally, commission paid to agents, not currently, but does offer revenue share on other products. So I'm just going to leave that there for you for a moment so you can have a look. Okay, so obviously if you want to spend a bit longer on this, you will be able to see this again once we post up on our YouTube channel the watch again video. So what I'll do is just move on a little bit more. Now, like I mentioned, we at James Ande have decided to team up with Zero Deposit, which actually is just at the bottom of this screen. So my apologies, but here it is, just at the bottom, highlighted there. So just to remind you then, Zero Deposit, FCA regulated, yes it is. Protected by FSCS, yes it is. Cover provided to landlords, it's 6 weeks rent, covering everything under the assured short hold tenancy. So mid-term tenancy, renewal or other conditions, there aren't any. The guarantee is in place for lifetime of the tenancy or 10 years. Dispute resolution provided by the TDS, which is really handy. We know that. That's who James Ande worked with for many years. What's the upfront cost to the tenant? It's 1 week's rent with no tax, so very straightforward. Are there extra costs in addition to the upfront fee to the tenant? Yes, £26 annual administration fee payable after 12 months. And is commission paid to agents? Yes, there is, depending on the volume of lets. Like I said, you can have another look at this on the watch again. So let's just take ourselves back to our slides. Okay, so let's take you then towards Zero Deposit and what they say. So first up, this is pretty much almost how they sell their product, let's say. So the first thing is promotion, and that's promotion of your property. So Zero Deposit believe that you could reach and attract a wider audience by having a zero deposit option against your property. So when you're marketing, for example, this may attract the attention of a tenant who wants to vacate their current property, but they've got to save up for a deposit, which is going to take them several months. They see your property online, they see there's no deposit required, i.e. it's a deposit replacement setup, which allows them to hopefully move and take action quicker, and you're therefore reaching people who you wouldn't normally reach without this option. Increases through click-through rates. This, it's a tricky one, this one, because it is quite a good claim, and I can see how this works. There was a study which backed up this claim, by the way, on one-bedroom properties that Zero Deposit embarked on with a particular agent, and what they claimed at the end of the study was that the click-through rates were up by 26% on one-bedroom properties that showed a zero deposit option was available. Now, click-through rates, by the way, are when people are looking for property on websites and they actually click on the thumbnail of the property and go through to more details. They look through photos, descriptions, etc. That's what a click-through rate is. So what they are saying is that it encourages people to spend more time on your property and to look at all the details in comparison to a property that didn't offer a deposit replacement option. Again, that kind of ties into you would stand out, or your property would stand out against other similar properties. So there's the benefit to the tenant there, but also the benefit to you because you're more attractive. Okay. So what about security? As we've noted, regulated by the FCA and underwritten by Munich Re. They do provide the same security for landlords as you would get today from a normal, I say normal, a traditional cash deposit. They last for 10 years, so no renewal or mandatory inspections, and the tenancy deposit scheme adjudicates, as we saw. So number 3, speed. So they claim that you can have faster renting. You can find a tenant faster for the reasons that we just said. You can speed up a tenant moving in. Now that is possible, but this is where I'm glad that we investigate things and read things properly before we agree to terms, because something that I need to make you aware of with zero deposit is if your tenant does want to take out a zero deposit agreement, and you are in favour of that as well, be aware that the tenant does have a 14-day cooling off period. So if they decide after all that they don't want to go ahead with the policy, they can cancel that within 14 days. So what we think would be a good idea is, if you have agreed to this scheme, that there is a 14-day lead time at least, to allow for this cooling off period to expire before the tenancy starts. And this is just our way of trying to protect you. However, it might not suit you in some instances, and you do need that tenant to move in as soon as possible, hopefully to cut down any void period where you're missing rent. So that is will be your choice, and we will talk to you about that and re-advise you should that be the case for one of your proposed tenancies. Okay, and that will be entirely your choice, and obviously we would have made you fully aware of the potential risks involved. Okay. And then finally, the speed of dispute resolution. Again, that is somewhat dependent on the responses of landlords and tenants, I might add, but obviously all agents, and I'm sure Zero Deposit, will do their very best to push through any disputes as quickly as possible. So what about tenants? What's the benefit? So the tenants purchase a guarantee for the cost of 1 week's rent, and that gives you the same protection as you have with any other cash deposit. These type of products appeal to tenants because they can help reduce the upfront cost of renting and speed up their rental process as well. A lot of people want to move pretty quickly for various reasons, so there is always a benefit to the tenant as well. In terms of protection, this is what Zero Deposits say. The guarantee gives you effectively the same cover as a cash deposit and lines up with your AST. As with a cash deposit, the tenants remain fully accountable for looking after your property and making rental payments. The guarantee is backed and underwritten by Great Lakes Insurance, which is part of Munich Re, which means there are safeguards in place to help ensure you get a fair and transparent product with no hidden risks. We've mentioned the risk that we've identified with the 14-day cooling off period. Then towards the end of the tenancy, you've got to think about Zero Deposit and their adjudication process. Zero Deposit are partnered with the TDS, like we mentioned, and they will make the decision on any disputes. So if you were to get paid with a traditional cash deposit from a claim, the outcome would be exactly the same. It's the tenancy deposit scheme that will release those funds. In the event of a fair claim found in your favour, Zero Deposit say they will pay you within 2 working days and pursue the tenant to reimburse them. So hopefully you would get your funds fairly quickly by the sounds of it. Now, finally, there were, we pondered on what might be some of the questions that we get asked by landlords regarding a deposit-free renting option. And so one of those was, that we assumed might be asked, will it attract the wrong type of tenants? And perhaps those that can't, afford a deposit, does that mean that there are affordability issues elsewhere? But actually the quality of the tenants will remain the same as it, because they will still be referenced under the usual criteria, and you will receive those reference reports as always for your approval. So really, we won't present to you anybody that can't afford the rent. The tenant will remain fully liable for damages and financial loss, like we mentioned. And of course, there's potential financial and credit record penalties if they fail to pay. Is the cash available for you to access? No, essentially, it's exactly the same as any other deposit. It's held by the tenancy deposit scheme, and it's obviously logged by Zero Deposit, and it remains there until the end of the tenancy and until any claim, should there be any, is resolved, and at that point any available funds would be made available to you as landlord. So what if Zero Deposit goes bust? So like we said, Zero Deposit operate in a FCA regulated environment. meaning there is the necessary protection in place. Also, the FCA put their partners, such as Zero Deposit, through rigorous diligence processes and financial checks to make sure that the products they offer are backed. If something were to happen to Zero Deposit, then all guarantees already purchased and in place are underwritten by Great Lakes Insurance, part of Munich Re that we said, and your cover would continue as expected until the tenancy ends and any claims are resolved. Then finally, what if you as landlord wanted someone who can afford a traditional cash deposit? Now, it's a fair question, but I guess many tenants today have can have a good monthly income, but maybe limited savings. And so deposits either need to be saved for, which takes time, or they're just paid on credit cards or perhaps borrowed from maybe a family member or friends. So it's not always the deposit that is the indicator of a good tenant. I would certainly direct you towards referencing and landlord comments from previous tenancies, probably more than their ability to pay a cash deposit. I would say that rental payments and being on time and in full and having a good record, I think would be a much better way of assessing your tenant. Equally, you know, the type of job they might have and affordability would be much better places to target in terms of finding your desired tenant. And of course, Zero Deposit do an element of referencing on their tenants as well. And so hopefully there's, you know, 2 levels where you are protected there. So in terms of the deposit-free option with Zero Deposit, like I said, it's come about more in terms of the changing environment that we're in terms of lettings, you know, and also partly because of demand that we're seeing. I think what we've agreed to do is if tenants approach us and ask if there is a Zero Deposit option, then of course that will be discussed with them and also discussed with you. But I think for the meantime, instead of overtly advertising this service right now, we will do what I've just said. It's available should tenants and landlords require the service and opt for that service, but we're not going to be overtly marketing this. However, you know, we're adaptable, we're flexible. If things change and it turns out that this is something that we really should, you know, be advertising and making more of, then of course we will do that, and I can update you regarding anything on that front. So if you've got questions and you want to ask anything about today's webinar, you are very, very welcome. There's my phone number and email address, so please do get in touch, and I look forward to hearing from you. Also, thank you very much to those of you that have submitted some questions, because I know that in a few weeks' time we will look at your lettings questions. Now, already there is a theme occurring. I've had a few people respond, and there is a particular question that's come up a few times, which I think I will probably follow up, but I will leave you in suspense, and you'll find out what that is in 2 weeks. But feel free to let me know if you have any questions that I might be able to answer on screen for you, and we can take it from there. So in the meantime, please you know, stay safe, keep looking after each other, and I do hope you have a lovely weekend. And yeah, I hope that the team can continue to look after all of you and provide a great service. So I'll see you soon. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.